What's up, everybody? My name is Daniel Unmanageable, and welcome to Hard Knox Talks. So, a few months ago, I saw tonight's guest in my suggested friend section on my social media page, and he looked like a guy that had a story, so I added him. A few days went by, and he started messaging me. And immediately we started talking about music, and he was talking about a project he was working on and was really excited about. And that project's name was Truth and Agony. So it turns out that he has a hell of a story. So let's get right into it. Let me introduce to you Luke. What's up, Luke? Oh, I muted you. You muted yourself. There we go.
Sorry, you can hear me now? All good?
I can hear you now.
Yeah. When it comes to this technology stuff, I got to get my 10-year-old to come help me with it because I'm lost,
Oh, you're doing just fine. If that's the worst thing that happens tonight, we're in good shape.
Awesome. Yeah, no doubt.
So we were talking quite a bit, actually. We've been talking quite a bit over the past few weeks, and I've learned a little bit about you.
You have,
The story you have to tell tonight is pretty profound.
to say the least, yeah.
Yeah. So why don't you start at the beginning? You grew up in a house with a father in law enforcement and a mother as a teacher.
Yeah,
so
I did.
Tell us a little bit about what that was like.
Well, even before that, you got to rewind to before then. I was adopted at birth. I was given up for adoption at birth. I was adopted when in the first year of my life. I was born in Meadow Lake, Saskatchewan, and I came to Saskatoon when I was just an infant. And my father was a police officer, and my mother was a teacher here in Saskatoon. So I grew up in a house that, like, there was no drugs in my house. There was no violence in my house. It was your typical Canadian 9-to-5 family. I had a wonderful childhood, absolutely wonderful. If you're watching, Mom, I love you.
Cool, man. So how old were you when you started thinking that substances might be like they started looking appealing to you, or were you?
I almost want to say like the stereotypical way, but really, is there a stereotypical way? Like, I was in high school, I was rebelling against my parents, remember, I was a teenager in the 90s, and the 90s were a much different time than they are now. But just, I got into it through friends, smoking weed and stuff like that. Somebody would steal a bottle of booze from their parents and things like that. And, just typical teenage kid stuff. Like, we never meant to go overboard or hurt anybody. Somebody would get drunk, fall down the stairs. We'd think it was funny, that kind of shit,
Yeah.
Like, nobody was getting killed. Nobody was getting hurt. Certainly nobody was going to jail. We were 13, 14, 15-year-old kids. I used to hang out on Broadway in Saskatoon. For those of you who are watching, Broadway in Saskatoon in the 90s was the place to be. It was awesome. It was so cool,
I was an 8th Street guy, so we probably would have fought.
Yeah. Well, we used to go to like the Fringe, and we were all like, okay, in the 90s in Saskatoon, it was this really weird phenomenon. A lot of kids that I knew, if you were like in trouble, or if you just couldn't pay attention or whatever, you got thrown in foster care. Like, a lot of kids that were teenagers in the 90s in Saskatoon that I knew, almost every kid I knew was involved in the system, the care system of one way or another, right? And we were usually left largely to our own devices. You know what I mean? We could do whatever we want. And yeah, so we got exposed to drugs pretty young, especially here in Saskatoon. And kids that were already in trouble that were a little older than us, they had weed and shit like that. And we dove right in. We weren't scared, like, we wanted to check it out. We were young, and everything was so new and exciting. We didn't know what it would lead to. Yeah.
So was it like did it start out slowly at first, like a weekend type thing? And then
totally, because it's funny, because I had a father who was a police officer. He used to tell me, as I was getting old enough to understand what, drugs and partying and that kind of stuff was, he was just so adamant against it. Like, he remember, you also got to remember that marijuana was illegal at this time. And if you were a teenager and you got caught with a couple joints, you were going to Kilburn Hall. Like, they weren't just going to take you to your parents. You were going to jail, and that was it, So my dad gave me like the talks, but I went into care when I was 13. Like, I went into foster care when I was 13 for being a troubled kid.
Yeah. So
And
tell us a little bit about that. What were some of the contributing factors that led to that happening?
like, okay, I was like I was starting to turn kind of mean. I was diagnosed with ADHD when I was a youngster, like severe ADHD, you know.
Mm.
But like I started getting kind of violent. You know, I was getting kind of violent with my friends and with my family and stuff. And looking back on it, if I was a parent that had a 13-year-old that was behaving the way I was, I wouldn't have known what to do either. And it wasn't because my parents were angry at me. They loved me. They were just concerned. And I was going to hurt myself for someone else. So they figured the best thing to do would be to do that. Right. So yeah, I didn't really, being in foster care caused one of two things for me. First of all, at the time, a lot of social workers that were working there had no business being social workers. You know what I mean? Like they just weren't in it for the right reasons. It was a different system than it is now, and a lot of kids have died to bring those changes to this system in Saskatchewan and Canada beyond. Right. So it was hard for someone whose most important years of what you learned growing up were bouncing around from house to house to house. I felt like I didn't belong. I felt like I wasn't wanted. I felt like I felt like I felt like a stranger in my own skin, you know, like I couldn't belong anywhere.
Yeah, no, I hear you. So what were some of the, like, how come you were getting bounced around? Was it the behavior, or was it
Well,
just like a matter?
that was the system. Like that was the placement. Like you as whatever age you were, it limited how long you could stay in one place. You know what I mean? Because
Oh,
there
really?
was so many kids coming into the system that they had to keep moving them along. Because at the time, the safeguards in place for becoming a foster parent were much more stringent than they are now. Much more stringent than they are now. And
Wow.
there just wasn't that many. And as kids stayed in the system and aged out, ones would come in to take their place. It was a conveyor belt. Foster care in Saskatchewan's big money, and the only way you're going to have foster care is if there's kids in it. You know what I mean? And there's no shortage of troubled families that have children that are also troubled that come into the system. And there is a few that it really works for, and they do better to themselves, and they do help themselves and become contributing members of society. But there's some that it just totally shatters their lives, and we see them on the streets every day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you were talking about violence and stuff when you were in care and bullying and things, tell us a little bit about what that looked like.
I remember. I'm sorry.
We don't have to go there.
Yeah, we do. They would remember, not all of them, but they would make you like fight for food, and you know, kids were being beaten, and they just oh, my wife.
Who do we
Dion.
have here?
This is my wife, Dion.
Hi, Dion.
Hi.
Yeah,
I'm just here for support for him.
Welcome.
Thanks.
They didn't care, right? Like you got thrown to the wolves. You got thrown to the wolves, and if you didn't know how to survive, that was it.
So how did that end for you? Did you age out, or?
Yeah, I aged out. Yeah, I remember I was 17 years old. I'd been in care for 4 years, and I was living in McNabb Park. And I remember telling the foster mom, who wasn't really a bad person. Like we weren't mistreated there, but she just had no clue what she was doing. She was doing it for the money, you know. I had a guitar amp, and I came home from school one day, and she had pawned it to buy tobacco, and it was the only thing I had, you know. I left. I went to go live on the street. It was better than being there. So that's what I did. I went to Vancouver, and I didn't come back to Saskatoon for a long time. I didn't call my mom. Nothing. I was just gone. Yeah, I needed to be gone. So that's what I did. I'm sorry.
It's okay. Take your time.
Yeah. It's just I wanted to go somewhere else and do something else and be someone else. So that's what I did.
And how was Vancouver?
Oh, it was awesome. It was awesome. Okay, like
Yeah.
I was a young kid. I'd never really been outside of Saskatoon. Like I'd been to Regina, maybe Calgary with my parents. But I remember I was 18 years old standing on East Hastings Street in Vancouver, and it was like I was in a movie. I could not believe it. Could not believe it. That kind of thing was going on. No. That kind of thing was going on every day on Hastings Street. I'd never been around heroin. I'd never been around cocaine. Like I left Saskatoon before that became a problem here. Like I remember when you were a kid, if you wanted to find drugs like that, you had to know somebody. It wasn't just on every corner like it is now.
Yeah.
The availability has skyrocketed, right? So I went down to Hastings and I met this guy, and he was much older than me, and he was obviously had been a drug addict for a long time. And I'll never forget, we were sitting on a bench, and I'd never taken hard drugs before. And he was like, "Brosty, is your heart broken?" I was like, "Yeah, of course." He's like, "Have you ever tried heroin?" I said, "No, but I'm going to." And I did. And it was exactly what I needed at the time. The cost was so much. But I really think if I wouldn't have done heroin, I probably would have killed myself. Isn't that horrible? Like, I would rather do heroin so I don't kill myself. And I saw the logic in that.
Yeah. Well, that's the nature of the disease, isn't it?
Yeah, it's brutal. It's brutal.
Yeah. It feels like the only way out. And oftentimes the right way to turn is really difficult. And when you are part of a vulnerable demographic,
Definitely.
Now back then might have been a little different, right? Now things are starting to slowly improve, where
Yes.
they have things like safe consumption sites.
Yeah.
They have things like they're working on safe supply and decriminalization.
Kits, so I absolutely do not understand when there is opposition to safe injection and Narcan. I do not get why there would be opposition to that. I think they should teach it in high schools. Like my wife Dion, when Dion and I were first dating, I was still using. I don't have years clean. I've been clean for maybe 6 months. And I remember having to teach Dion how to use an naloxone kit because I was still using. And then she must have saved my life 4 or 5 times. I OD'd, and like I had to teach her how to save my life. And she stayed, right? Awful.
So let's talk a little bit about the hitchhiking. You've been around, man.
Okay. Sure. Yeah. I love you. She's like a support blanket. You just wrap her around you and you're good. Yeah, she's great. I like Dion and my band absolutely saved my life. Saved my life.
I met your band. I met your band a little while ago when we did a photo shoot. They seemed like solid guys, and they seem like they're there for you, man. It's good.
They are. One of the first things. We'll get to the hitchhiking in a second because that is definitely
okay. We got to talk about the hitchhiking.
One of the first things I said to my band when we first got together was that I am a recovering addict, and I don't have 10, 15, 20 years clean. Like I'm recently clean. But I want to be honest with you guys to let you know that, like, even though it's no longer an issue, I'm still doing it. Like, it's not a done deal, you know. It's not, there is no ex-addict. You're an addict forever. You're just a practicing or a non-practicing one. I'm a non-practicing one. I'm also on Suboxone, right? And which I recommend to everyone. If anyone is on methadone, get off it and go on Suboxone.
Okay. We're not going to start giving medical advice.
Oh no. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm not a doctor. No, this is my opinion only, right? Yeah. I think I think that there's so many supports in place today that weren't in place 5 years ago.
Yeah. No, whatever is working for the people that are using it.
Continue to do it. Absolutely.
Do that.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So when I was 18, I remember a friend of mine wanted to go to some concert in Calgary, and I was living in Vancouver at the time. And he was like, "Well, Rusty, we're going to go to this concert." And it was actually the Ramones. Love them. And he's like, "We're going all the way to Calgary." I'm like, "Okay, well, like, are we going to go to the airport?" He's like, "No." I'm like, "Well, are we going to catch a bus?" He's like, "No." And drive? No. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? Flap our arms? He's like, "Well, we're going to hitchhike." I'm like, "What?" He's like, "Come on, let's go." So I went with him. And the very first ride that picked us up was this old hippie dude. This guy must have been in his 70s, dreadlocks and tattoos of like Maori surfer tattoos on his neck. Just the coolest guy in the world. And I remember, and he was so interested in me because I'd never been hitchhiking before. And I lived in BC. And to him, if you lived in BC and never hitchhiked before, that's like walking around with no pants on. It's just, it's weird, you know? Everybody does it. And he just thought it was the absolute coolest thing that on a whim, I decided to hitchhike. So I actually continued it. I was 19. I was severely addicted to heroin. And I had my oldest daughter in Vancouver at the time. Her mother and I split up because she wasn't a drug user, right? And she wasn't going to have that around the baby. So I started hitchhiking. I just started traveling around, and I actually kept that going for almost 20 years. I would hitchhike somewhere. I would stay there for a few years, and then, you know, I'd move on. I lived in Vancouver Island. I lived in Winnipeg for a long time. I lived in Montreal for a long time. I came back here once or twice. I lived in Edmonton, Red Deer, Vancouver Island, Vancouver, Surrey. Like, just, I've been everywhere, man. I've been everywhere, you know? Yeah. Beautiful country of ours. And it's awesome that I got to see it. You know, I highly suggest, if anyone, once COVID's all done, if you're able to travel, go do it. It's good for the soul, for sure.
Yeah. So, and you were did you mention down into the States? I'm sorry, my son walked out and distracted me there.
Oh, no, that's cool. Yeah. I actually started hopping freights and like freight trains and stuff like that when I was in my late teens, early 20s. And yeah, I ventured into the States a few times, like illegally, of course, but it was like a farm field with like a fence and a cow and a moon, and that was it. Like, it was in the middle of nowhere.
There was a cow?
Well,
was it an American cow or a Canadian cow?
Yeah, like we would cross on the train. We would hop on in this little tiny farm town beside. We would hitchhike from here to by Estevan, and then we would cross into North Dakota, and then from North Dakota you get to Minot. You jump on a Greyhound, you can go anywhere, right? So I tried not to do that too many times, because if you get caught, you are definitely up the creek. And so last time I went to the States has been quite some time, but yeah, I've gone down there a few times. Yeah, had a great time. Loved it. You got it's a big world. You got to go see it, you know? Gotta check it out. Yeah. Awesome,
man. So what happened you ended up in Winnipeg in 2004?
Yeah.
And you decided that you wanted to try a new substance.
I did. Yeah. I actually started smoking crack. God. Loser. Oh God, it's just terrible. And you know what? I went into it for the wrong reasons too. You know what I mean? I was looking to fill my time with something destructive. Like, I just didn't care at that point. You know, like, I wouldn't say I was suicidal. Like, I wouldn't say then I was. No, not at all. But
yeah,
I just, if it happened, it happened. If it didn't, it didn't. So I had a roommate at the time who literally had basketball-sized chunks of crack at all times. He was really high up there, and he would just hand me thousands of dollars worth and say, "Go sit in the bathroom for a day. See you later." Okay, so that's what I did. Yeah, it was terrible. And pretty much, I did it for like almost a summer. And then as soon as the summer was over, I was like, "Okay, I'm not doing this anymore." And you know what? It's been over 11 years. I never once thought about it again. I just did it, checked it out, got the shirt, and I'm gone. Hey, speaking of shirts, nice shirt you're wearing there, man. Right
Oh,
on.
you like it? I like it too.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
this
I have
band
it-
that
I
I
have
know.
one
Yeah, look
myself.
at us. We're besties. We're wearing each
No
other's
doubt,
clothing.
okay, yeah. Maybe
Yeah.
must have did a little couple tradesies over there.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I
So-
never got into the ups. Eh? It was never my thing, right? Like I never really got into meth. It's not my thing. Everyone has their thing, but destruction's destruction. Doesn't really matter who, what, when, where, why, or how. You all kind of end up in the same place. So whether you're smoking crack, snorting meth, or shooting heroin, it's all addiction and it's all destructive. So it doesn't really matter, you know. But
yeah, some might get you there a little faster, but the end result can always be the same, you know.
Yeah, well, especially that meth stuff like that, man. Like I have a personal friend. He's been a friend of mine for a long, long time, and we recently had to quit being friends because I wanted to get clean. And when I did get clean, he kind of resented me. It was almost like anytime even if I talked to him, just like, hey, how you doing? He always looked like I was talking down to him because I was clean and, oh, you're not. Like, and it wasn't like that at all. And he just went on this trip and like planting cameras and mics, you know, meth stuff, right? Like just, we live in Saskatoon. We've all seen it, right? It's just, it's insane. So I ended up having to block him. 17 years we've been friends and I miss him terribly. If you're watching this, I hope you get some help, man. Call me.
Yeah, it's really terrible that that our society isn't yet at a point where help is so readily available. Like, wouldn't it be nice if there was something that you could just like do for him, or a resource that you could make available, you know?
But you're touching on a really good question, Dan, and that's why I like your podcast, because you do ask questions that nobody asks. Why isn't it readily available? It's common knowledge that we have an epidemic with drugs and with people dying, opioids, meth, crap, everything. It's out of control. So why is it not readily available? And the fact that it's facing opposition when it's so bad, you know, like the safe injection site in Saskatoon faced a lot of opposition. Why? Like, people complain about the needles in the streets, but then you don't want somewhere for them to put them. Like, you can't have it both ways, you know. You have to it's and the problem's going to get a lot worse before it gets better, and that's really sad.
There's really a lot to be said about the benefits of safe injection and safe supply.
Safe supply,
safe consumption. You know, you got to think about crime rates. You know, you got to think about you know, but sadly, people aren't ready to see that for what it is yet. It seems as though we get blamed on, we get judged on the behavior. You know, we're not seen as sick people.
No,
we're seen as bad people.
Yeah, criminals. It's looked at as a crime and not a health issue. Like countries like, I have a friend actually who's from Norway, and he was telling me in Norway that they don't have drug crime because if you're an addict, you go to the government and your drugs are all given to you, prescription, so you don't have to go out and steal. And and because they know that they'll have their drugs, they lead full and productive lives and pay taxes, and there's no crime. They have, I think, 4 or 5 jails, and they're all empty. There's nobody in them because there's no crime.
And I've heard that in the past. Now, I don't have any solid research to support that right now, so I don't want to speak too deeply into it. But I have heard that from the countries like Sweden and Norway and Amsterdam. I mean, Amsterdam has had really lax laws on drugs for a long time.
Yeah, since like the late 60s or early 70s with pot and stuff. Yeah. Well, the European countries, that should be kind of a model of what we hope to do, because they still have their problems. Of course they will, but they're nowhere near with the violence, especially the violence, right, is nowhere near, because you take the black market out of it and the gangs want nothing to do with it. So there's no money in it, right?
Yeah.
No,
and there's, I mean, and I think we are very slowly making progress. We are starting to see more talk about it on mass media, like on the news. They're talking about Narcan. They are talking about safe injection sites. I saw Jason Mercredi on the news not that long ago. So we are starting to have the conversation, but we need to keep having it.
It's definitely a step in the right direction, but it shouldn't have come to this. Like, how many people have died in Canada since fentanyl popped up in 2012? I think it was 2012, 2013. Lots. It just decimated us, right? And the age of people that are using fentanyl is getting younger and younger and younger and younger. And it's absolutely terrifying. Like I'm about to be a grandfather. I have a 20-year-old daughter who's battles some substance issues, and I also wonder if I passed that gene on to her, you know, because it was passed on to me from my family, and it has to stop being looked at as a crime and so stigmatized. Like if someone has a drug problem, people are like, oh, you can't trust them and they're just not good people, and that's not the way it is, you know. Anyone can get addicted to drugs. Like you break your leg, you're falling down the stairs, the doctor gives you OxyContin. If you take it as prescribed for a week, you are addicted, period.
Well, okay, so I don't know if I would go that far to say you'd be addicted, but it definitely opens a door.
Yeah,
it definitely opens the door.
It's not so much the mental, it's more the physical after a week. But if you continue and your doses are escalating, it'll definitely take a toll on you. Always, right? Always.
It can, yeah. Now some people, like, that's not the case with everybody.
No.
But it does, like I said, it does open a door, and it does. Yeah. You know, if somebody has an affinity to that sort of thing, and they are introduced to it, then
slippery slope, man. Slippery slope.
Anyways, back to Luke.
Yeah.
So you were in Winnipeg in 2004, and you tried some new things. Yeah. Now in 2008, you end up back in Saskatoon.
I did. Yeah. I had to come home. I came home. I was actually, after Winnipeg, I went to the island for a little while, and I stayed on the island for about 2 years, and then that tower kind of crumbled. So I came home, and I had my youngest daughter, Ariel. I just took her out for supper at my mom's tonight here. She's my youngest, so no more children for me, but no.
Knock on wood.
I've got 3. Grandbaby, good enough for me. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
But ever since I got clean, I you know what, family is one thing that really came back into my life, because I came from a family, like in my family, no one's ever really been involved in drugs or in trouble or anything, you know, nothing like that. So I was kind of a black sheep, and once I got clean, I realized just how much my family really did love me that whole time, because I was so blinded by it. You know, I was so in my own thing and in my own darkness that I couldn't see the light that they were offering, couldn't see the forest because of the trees, kind of thing, you know. And it's funny how once you move away from the substances and you sit back and look back on some of the things in your life, you realize how right people were about some things and how wrong you were. So it's really humbling, you know. It's really humbling.
Mm-hmm. So you're back in Saskatoon.
Yeah.
And in 2015, you ended up in the pen.
Yeah. You know, alcohol and I wouldn't say I've ever had really a problem with alcohol, but alcohol definitely has a problem with me. Like I don't always do stupid things when I'm drinking, but when I'm drinking, I always do stupid things. You know, like I was dating a girl. I got into an argument with her, and she said something that to me that offended me deeply, and I had a cup in my hand, and I threw it, and it shattered on the wall, and a piece cut her. A piece of the glass nicked her, and she was injured. And I ended up pleading guilty, and I got 40 months in the pen. So I went up to Sask Pen here in the end of 2015 in PA. Yeah.
And what was that experience like for you?
You know, like being involved in the drug culture. So you're around people that have been to jail, whether it's provincial or federal, and you hear all the horror stories and stuff. And in a way it's true, and in a way it's not. It all depends on you. You know, like if you know how to behave, and if you know how to kind of mind your P's and Q's and stuff like that, you'll be all right, you know. But if you're involved in gangs, or if you've, you know, done some pretty wrong stuff, or if you've got sex offenses or things like that, you're probably going to have a hard time. Yeah. Yeah, I did okay, because I'm not a gang guy, right? I'm not. I didn't really know much about that stuff, so I got left alone. You know, I play guitar. Those guys like that kind of stuff, so cool.
Yeah. Oh, you played guitar in the pen?
Oh yeah. I got to bring one of my guitars in with me, and it came home with me. Definitely.
Oh wow.
They have a whole music room with drums and mics and amps and basses, and nobody uses it because they're all those. They're all gangsters, and they all want to do the hip hop thing, which is cool, you know, if that's your deal. So yeah. I was in that jam room every day I was available to. Anytime I was allowed, I was in there. I'd be playing with guys, and it was awesome. That's how I did my time, guitar. Yeah.
Right on.
Yeah.
So what happened in 2016?
Oh, in PA, yeah, that riot in December. What happened was our food portions were getting smaller and smaller, and they were letting us out for work later and later and later. And if you go to work late, they dock your pay, and just a bunch of really little things that could have been addressed a long time before didn't get addressed, and it boiled up and boiled up. And yeah, a riot cracked off. I was on E12 on my block, and I remember going into my cell to put a book away and coming out of my cell, and it was like literally dead quiet. And it was the only time I've ever heard that in prison. Like, you always hear noise, yelling, echoes, banging, clanging. It was dead quiet. And then you heard on the intercom an English voice saying, it's literally called being read, the Riot Act. God save the Queen. And as soon as they said God save the Queen, flashbang grenades were getting tossed into the range from the barricade that guys had tied the cell doors shut so you couldn't open. And they were smashing and yeah, it was pandemonium. It went from dead quiet to 200 guys lighting fires, stabbing each other, gunshots, flashbangs, screaming, blood. Yeah, guy got murdered. There was about $5 million in damage. Yeah, it was really something. You know, it was one of the only times in my life where I ever really felt that, like, am I going to survive this? Like, am I going to make it through? And my cellmate at the time, I won't say his name, but and I know he's not watching because he's a lifer and he's in there, but buddy, you saved my life and I'll never forget it. We came out of the cell, and I didn't really know him that well at the time. I'd only been there for just over a year, and he hooked his arm through mine, and we walked down the range back to back so that no one could run up behind us. And we got on the other side of the fire, so the guards couldn't see through the fire. So we figured if we were on the other side of the flames, they wouldn't be able to see us, and we just laid down. And guys were still throwing pieces of concrete and breaking glass and ripping cell doors. And yeah, we rioted for about 13 and a half hours. We rioted all day, almost all night. And before they finally brought it under control. Yeah. And the one guy, he was murdered in his cell. We were listening to this guy. He must have gotten stabbed maybe 70 times. You just hear the thud of, and as we're laying there, this guy's saying his kids' names and stuff, and his voice is getting quieter and quieter and quieter, and he died. You know, he died there on that floor. Yeah,
that's terrible.
Yeah, it's awful. And you know what? He only had 2 months to go before he was let out too. He was almost done. But that's gangs. You know, that's blood in, blood out. That's the way it is with that stuff. And that's one thing I've never ever wanted to be involved in, that kind of organized crime. You know, like, it just doesn't seem worth it to me. You know, and it was just it was hell on earth. It was like a movie. I can't fully describe it without, you know, you being there, right? Like, it just,
yeah.
I hope I never see it again. I've never seen anything like it ever.
So you get through that, you serve your time.
Yeah.
So what was it like getting out? I know a lot of people don't ask that question.
Yeah.
You know, you'd think that it was, I'm out and everything's great and I'm happy.
No,
you know,
just my hands are going like this, just thinking about how it was. My heart was hammering. Like, you get out of prison. Like, I just done 37 and a half months in medium and maximum security, and I got out from maximum security, and yeah, like, I was so paranoid and so afraid, you know, like I didn't know how to act, right? Like, I didn't know how to think. Like, I would see something that someone would do, like, even in my own household, I would have a friend over and he would reach across me to grab a bottle. In the pen, you don't do that. You know what I mean? Like, you do not do that. Someone will hurt you, you know? And I just trying to get back to me. Like, there's the me in prison, and then there was the me now, you know, like when I'm out, and I couldn't get back to the out me anymore. I had to relearn how to be that me.
So here's a question.
I had a decent supportive friends to help me through that. Yeah.
Was there any support offered to you? Like, when you left the pen, were the people there like, here's this person you can talk to, here's
and the reason why is because I didn't get parole. I stayed the entire thing. Like, normally you do your truth, you do 1/3, and you can apply for parole. And then you have to convince the board to let you out. But at 2/3, that's your statutory release. They have to let you out. But from your stat release until your warrant expiry date, you're still pretty much on parole. You have to piss in a cup. You have to report. I stayed right till my warrant expiry date. So I got out a free man. No conditions, no strings attached.
And not even an offer of assistance?
No, nothing.
Huh.
Just asking me when my ride's coming and hurry up and get out pretty much, you know?
Crazy.
Yeah, they couldn't be bothered. They had to process 8 new guys that were coming in, right? They're not
Yeah.
bothered. I did my time. Their responsibility to me is over. I'm somebody else's problem now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you got out, you kind of got back into it. So
Yeah,
what was the pinnacle moment? Like there was, because I know you were talking about overdoses and stuff like that.
Yeah. Like I you know what? While I was in the pen, I didn't use. I was clean, you know. And when I first got arrested and went to the correctional for the 7 months before I did the 37.5 months in the pen, I wasn't really using that much either. I was drinking a lot and using other substances, but I wasn't wired, so I wasn't going to go through withdrawals. But when I got to the pen, I didn't use, and when I got out, I was like, "Okay, you know, this is my chance. I'm clean, I'm healthy, I'm strong. Let's do something different with my life." And that lasted all of, you know, maybe about 5 hours or so. And I got high that night, right? And actually, the day I got out of the pen was my first serious OD. Like I literally took 1 puff of fentanyl, like a crumb on tinfoil, and I just keeled right over. My buddy said he was pretty much standing on my chest. And I coughed and he threw some water on me, and that was it. And my use just escalated after that. I used to make jokes that, God, it sounds so terrible to say now, but I used to make jokes that if fentanyl couldn't kill me, nothing can. Mm-hmm. And just the fact that that's where my head was at, like, it's almost like I'm talking about someone we know and not me, you know?
Yeah.
It was just, and I just dove headfirst into it, knowing full well the risks and that whatever tolerance I did have was gone. So I built that back up pretty quick, and pretty soon I was smoking like a point per hit. I would smoke 5-6 points a day, half a gram of fentanyl a day. Like it's ridiculous. I drained all our finances. My wife was about to leave me, and I didn't blame her at the time. And actually, to be honest, I didn't care because, well, she doesn't use drugs, right? And she wasn't supporting this in any way, and I was doing it behind her back, and yeah, it was awful. It would be humorous if it wasn't so serious, you know? Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was ugly.
So what was the moment for you? What finally did it?
Okay. It was my 39th birthday just in September here last fall. And I lied to Dion and I said, "Oh, I'm gonna go out drawing or painting, whatever, you know, I'm just gonna go out for a bit, I'll be back." Knowing full well I was going out to get dope because my buddy was going to give me some for free for my birthday. I didn't have no money. And I had a piece of tinfoil and I smoked it in an alley. And like I literally blinked and woke up in St. Paul's Hospital. So I guess I, again, timbered over and somebody had found me, thank God, because I would have died. And I was laying in the stretcher, like in the room. And, you know, like they have those cloth partitions to separate the beds. The nurse and the doctor were on the other side of this partition, and I'm assuming they still thought I was asleep, but like the partition was in front of me so I could see their silhouettes. And the doctor was holding a chart saying, "Well, who do we have here?" And the nurse was like, "Oh, that's Brosky. He's a regular, just a junkie, you know?" And I remember how embarrassed and how ashamed I felt of hearing the word junkie. Like, even I used to call myself a junkie all the time. Like, in a way I still do. But when someone else says it, it really hurts. So I was really, really embarrassed. I was really ashamed of myself that I had been lying to my wife all this time to go out and get. It was my 39th birthday and I almost died because I wanted to get high. My wife had planned an evening for me and I just skipped out on it to go smoke dope in an alley. Like, what? No. I told myself, I was like, listen, and when I first woke up, I touched my pocket to make sure my drugs were still there, of course. And they were. And I walked home from the hospital. I signed myself out. And from the time I'd left Dion and OD'd and left the hospital, it was about 3 hours. So in my mind, it was believable that I was actually out and didn't OD. I hid the form for the hospital that I signed, right? And I came home and I remember looking in the mirror and getting ready to smoke the rest of this drugs. and I just dumped it in the toilet. I just didn't even think. I just pretty much swept it off the counter. Like I didn't pick it up. I just swept it. I was like, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not doing this anymore. And
that was it.
Well, I used it slightly for a week because I